I'm not gonna go through the whole names thing again. If you want to call him the purple guy, Springtrap, Scraptrap, Glitchtrap, or William Afton, it doesn't matter to me. However, one thing that does matter is lives, and our good old pal Willy A has taken quite a few. Whether they be directly or indirectly, Springtrap has killed so many people that honestly, they shouldn't be recreating him and sending him to kids' homes like they do in the AR game. But questionable business decisions beside, we're taking a look at some of the most notable victims today. Greetings gamers and welcome back to Top 10 Gaming. I'm Connor Munro and this is the Top 10 Scary FNAF Springtrap Victims. Let's do it. In at 10, Springtrap. Now, this number is really meta and that's why it's starting off the list. But this isn't a metaphorical or philosophical number as if you thought it was going to be. Springtrap has literally killed other versions of himself in the Fazbear Fright story of In the Flesh from the 5th Fazbear Frights book Bunny Call. After Matt hadn't playtested a VR game he was working on for a few days called Springtrap's Revenge, he came back to find piles of dead Springtraps that the AI had somehow spawned in order to have something to kill. It's absolutely horrifying and it's just plain weird. Like, why would you spawn more versions of yourself in order to have something to kill? Like, isn't that just like a paradox? Like how you physically are unable to prevent yourself from being born, since if you do, you fade out of existence, but then you can't go back and prevent it. So like, you can't stop yourself from being born because then you can't stop yourself from being born. I mean, well, depending on what theories about time travel that you believe, whether you believe Back to the Future or Endgame. That also makes it impossible for your younger siblings to prevent you from being born, but the older ones can prevent the younger ones because they'd still be alive before you were conceived. So watch out, Jordan. And at 9, Hudson. Hudson is the protagonist of What We Found, the third story in the 8th Fazbear Frights book Gumdrop Angel. Hudson has short blonde hair with a pale beard and blue eyes. He also has straight white teeth. He has bruises and burns all over his body. He's 6'1" and skinny. Almost like me, except my teeth aren't white and I'm not 6'1", and I don't have a beard. But I have blue eyes and I'm skinny. Hudson is a security guard at the upcoming horror attraction of Fazbear's Fright. His life up to this point has been filled with nothing but tragedy. His father committed suicide and his mother remarried a man named Lewis who would physically abuse Hudson at nearly every chance he got. He also became the main target for bullies who would hold his head down while flushing a toilet. Hudson began to fail school, and instead of trying to help him, the teachers would instead call him names and tell him that he's dumb. Gotta love the public school system, am I right? The story would later reveal that Hudson's family home burned down with Lewis and his mother inside, killing them. While Hudson does burn in an oven at the end of the story, he was in essence driven there by Springtrap, who was the main antagonist of the story. So still a Springtrap victim. By the way, Hudson was also the one who set the fire that killed his mom and Lewis, so. And at 8, Jeremy. There aren't many glitchtrap victims, so we can't really do one of those lists. But since Jeremy from FNAF VR was driven to suicide by glitchtrap, who is William Afton's code form, I think it's close enough to deem a Springtrap killing. Jeremy from FNAF VR is the game tester who tested the game before Tape Girl, and is the one who Tape Girl found after he cut off his face using a guillotine paper cutter. This was thanks to William invading Jeremy's mind through the use of the VR game, which is still confusing to me, since unless you were connected in some form of Sword Art Online haptic suit, it shouldn't really be possible. We're only seeing the game with our eyes, not plugged in like the Matrix, but I don't know why I'm bothered by it. I mean, I'm literally talking about a game series where a man possessed by the spirit of a child exploded after somehow communicating while comatose, had then used his intense agony to possess a hard drive that then gets scanned to create an AI that allows this man to continue living. So I don't know why I'm getting caught up in semantics, honestly, but yeah. Jeremy. And at 7, Vanny. Vanny is the planned main antagonist of the next FNAF game Security Breach. There is not much we know about Vanny, but there are plenty of theories. Some believe Vanny to be the glitchtrap controlled version of Vanessa, which would make sense. Some also believe that she was the girl who recorded the tapes in FNAF VR, aptly referred to as Tape Girl, who I literally just mentioned, which would also make sense. And while both of these are probably true, even if they aren't, somehow Vanny did fall under William's control, which in essence makes her a Springtrap victim, even if it was glitchtrap who was controlling her, but he also would have manifested in that suit because he didn't want to relive the agony of being spring-locked, so he was still basically Springtrap. Look, this was a hard list, okay? And I had to add this number at the end. I had to add it so that I had 10 points, okay? So chill for a minute and let me do my thing. And at 6, Charlie. Okay, so in a way, Charlie in the Twisted Ones novel is a victim of Springtrap. And by in a way, I'm gonna have to suspend my disbelief because she was still a robot. While the original Charlie was killed by William Afton, in the Twisted Ones, one of the 4 robotic versions of Charlie gets snatched by a twisted animatronic and gets killed. Which only makes things more confusing when another version of Charlie, who is much older, shows up. But that's not the point. The point is that at this point, William had become Springtrap, and the twisted animatronics were his invention. So while yes, she was a robot, she was still a sentient robot who got snatched by an Afton creation after he had become Springtrap, so that's good enough for me. This was, like I said, actually harder than I thought it was going to be. William doesn't do much killing after becoming Springtrap, because he's locked in a room for 30 years. Most of the damage was already done at that point, so please forgive a few leaps in logic or suspension of disbelief, please. Thank you. Halfway through into number 5, Matthew. Remember how earlier I talked about how Springtrap was killing himself in the Springtrap's Revenge VR game in the Fazbear Frights book Bunny Call? Well, not only does he do that, but he also tears the main character Matthew to shreds. Now, some do consider this Matthew to be a reference to MatPat of game theory, and it makes sense why. But what makes this bad is that the community considers this an M-Preg fanfiction, which I have to say, I enjoyed not knowing what that was until I had to ask my sister about it because it was everywhere online. She's really into fanfiction, it's kinda concerning. Anyway, basically Matthew in this story gets implanted with a baby Springtrap thanks to a program called itsaboy.exe, which literally ends up tearing him to shreds from the inside out. Hardly a fun experience, I would say. Yet some women go their whole lives wanting to give birth and have kids. But I mean, at least most of the time, they don't kill you from the inside out. Or rather, they don't usually claw at you and dig through your stomach. That's exclusive to Springtrap. I hope. In at 4, Henry. Henry is another case that is kind of like victim adjacent, and not in a sense where he was a victim because he killed Charlie like I said last time, but rather because Henry lets himself die in FNAF 6 in order to ensure that nobody remembers what William did. However, William does end up escaping, but Henry stayed put and let himself burn in the FNAF 6 fire because of Springtrap, and then it turned out that it was all for nothing, because nobody is standing in his way anymore. So honestly, while not directly killed by Springtrap or William, Henry is one of the biggest victims that William has. He took his family and his life, all for nothing, since it didn't actually put an end to his reign of terror. But maybe, like the ultimate custom night Samurai Freddy cutscene suggests, maybe Henry is also still alive, possessing an object looking to come back to keep pursuing that anime fox. At least, I wouldn't be surprised if Henry turned out to be Glamrock Freddy or something like that. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Gregory. Now, with Security Breach not releasing until late 2021, we can only speculate as to what happens to our next main character and our player, Gregory, in the next Fazbear game. However, it's entirely possible that Gregory ends up getting killed. Think about it. This is literally a kid who is fighting one of the FNAF universe's deadliest child serial killers, who has multiple animatronics out to find him and control over a security guard. Not only that, but it's entirely possible that Glamrock Freddy ends up betraying us and crushing us while we're inside of him. That sounded weird. It's not like we haven't been killed in the games before, or at least horribly mutilated like we were in Sister Location. And we as the player die in FNAF 6 along with Henry. So Scott is not new to killing off the main player in his games. But also, realistically, he's a kid. And like, what's he gonna be able to do against a literal sentient code? And if he lives, there will be someone to tell the cops what happened. And if William was paying them off, he certainly wasn't anymore, so maybe they can have an actual investigation this time. But only if Gregory lives. So he's probably gonna die. Penultimately, in at number 2, Michael Afton. Now, this may be confusing to some of you since Michael doesn't die until FNAF 6, but come on, this guy is the biggest Springtrap victim of them all. Let's just recap what happens to Springtrap's own son, for God's sake. He kills his brother, assuming that's actually what happened. He then learns about his father's killing spree and tries to right his wrongs. While doing so, he is haunted by the spirits of the children his father has killed, and then learns about how his sister has possessed an animatronic after getting scooped so many years ago. Then he learns that he is probably a robot and gets ripped open by a scooping machine. After this, a giant robot amalgamation of parts fills his body and lets him bruise and rot while wearing him like a suit after Barney Stinson had a mental breakdown, and then he vomits that entire animatronic back out. Can you imagine how painful that would be? The 7-foot tall mass that is entered coming out of your throat. but somehow he's still alive. Then he finds a job posting about a new Fazbear location and applies for it, but then has to salvage animatronics that include the thing that ruined his body, his long dead sister, one of his father's earliest victims, and his father, all of which may kill him if he's not on high alert. This man has suffered probably the most in the entire series. That's absolutely horrifying. Finally, in at number 1, William Afton. Yes, here we are again. While I already said Springtrap himself as the first number, I'm gonna round it off with some more self-reflection. Like I said, this list was hard. However, the most important victim Springtrap could have had would have been William Afton himself. Let's remember, Springtrap isn't a separate character. He is the body of William Afton that got spring-locked after he hastily put on his murder costume in the back room of an early Fazbear location after accidentally releasing the souls of his original victims. Whether it was to make them feel scared or to make himself feel more powerful, his haste coupled with the moisture from the leaking ceiling caused the spring lock mechanisms to fail, shooting thousands of metal parts deep into his body. It would have killed him if not for the spirit that had possessed him that was intentionally keeping him alive. That's brutal. I mean, he absolutely deserves it, don't get me wrong, but that has to be included on this list. I mean, I was told that William should have been on the purple guy victims list, so there you go. Here he is. There we have it, friends, the top 10 scary FNAF Springtrap victims. Who did you expect to see on this list, and whose victims should we cover next? If there are any to cover next. I don't actually think that there is. Either way, if you think of one, let me know down below. Thank you all so much for watching. I have been and shall remain Munro, and I'll see you in another video.